Welcome to the HR stream on iTV-Asia. I'm Frank Mulligan, your host from Ascetis International. And with me today is Larry Wang, who's the Managing Director of Wang & Lee.
How you doing, Frank? Good to see you.
Now, you're an old hand in China, in fact, in Asia generally. How did you get started, and how did you start Wang & Lee?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm an American-born Chinese, so I spent most of my life in the States, at least the early part of my life. But I got out here about 18 years ago in 1990, and I started in Taipei. And actually, I've done kind of a bit of a tour of duty through Greater China, 4 years in Taipei, 5.5 in Hong Kong through the handover years, and I actually moved to mainland China in 1999. And during this time in China, I've spent about half my time in Shanghai, half in Beijing, and I'm based in Shanghai now. But regarding my company, I started that 14 years ago during my last year in Taipei.
And that's a long time in China.
Yeah, it is a long time, yeah. And the first idea about the company, or my initial concept, was that particularly in the mid-90s and that period of time, you know, there were so many international companies entering and expanding here in Greater China, and new industries with new products, new services, new business approaches, management styles. In business services like consulting, iBanking, IT was booming at that time, the consumer market. And basically these are international companies that led by international business styles, but operating in a local business environment. So the need at that time was for these high caliber, particularly at the management and leadership levels, but bilingual, international caliber
people who can transition both sides.
Yeah, they can handle the range of business situations from the very local to the corporate headquarters, dealing with home office, etc. And at that time, the answer seemed to be a lot of returning Chinese, regional Chinese, maybe working, studying abroad, like in Europe or U.S., and overseas Chinese that have these ethnic Chinese backgrounds and a certain level of language ability, but they have the really reputable international company backgrounds as well, for this region.
And since then, you've actually obviously you've expanded since then. That was the starting point. The starting point is kind of like almost like a cultural play,
right?
But you're actually being ABC, you're able to do that transition.
Yeah,
yourself.
we're definitely trying to leverage the best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds,
yeah.
So, but since then, obviously, you've expanded quite a bit, and now you're actually. What's the situation now?
Well, so those first 5 years and up to about maybe 2000, 2001, actually our business was very Hong Kong centric. So, at that time, Hong Kong was the regional commercial center, financial center, and it was the gateway to China. That was the entry point to China. And so probably 75% of our database kind of looked like me, sounded like me, or they were regional Chinese that spent a fair amount of time abroad. But actually now, about 95% of our business is mainland-centric, because this is where the growth has been in the last 7-8 years. Headcount, operations, investment, and so now about 80% of our database is mainland-born Chinese, and of those, it's two flavors. Mainly, of that portion, 80% of those are homegrown mainlanders. Then that means they've never been abroad before to study or work, maybe to travel, for vacations and stuff, but predominantly they've developed their careers in China, but working for these world-class companies here like a Microsoft or Motorola, a P&G, a Nike, etc. And then the other 20% that are mainland-born, but they're of the flavor maybe just abroad for maybe a 2-year master's, an MBA typically, as opposed to like maybe 15, 20 years ago, it was engineers going abroad and staying in, in the United States for maybe 10 or 15 years. Which is a different flavor. Those people are almost like overseas Chinese like me, because if you've been away from China for 10 or 15 years, you're pretty out of touch with the realities of the market.
Reality of the market. Yeah. So it's a shift now from people who are kind of geographically international to people who are based in China but are mentally international in the sense that they've grown up they've worked in international companies. They've probably grown up watching Friends and all these different programs.
That's exactly right.
So they can get what the big noser is saying.
That's right. Well, actually, so one of the things in our company, we have so we do recruitment for a lot of international companies, IT, business services, consumer services, and retail, manufacturing. And no matter what the industry, no matter what the function, no matter what the the level, we look for 5 main things. Okay, so we look for bilingual, we look for international